Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Wednesday, February the 12th. And as we like to do once a week, we'll be chatting with our good friend Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. Let me say hello to our friend Bill. And it's always a great pleasure to see you, Bill.
And a pleasure to see you too, Silvio.
All right. Well, we got a lot to get into. So I thought we would start with a couple of lighter issues, more fun, maybe historical. But today, being February the 12th, is, of course, Abraham Lincoln's birthday, and the great emancipator, the president of the United States. And I wanted to tell you a little story, Bill. I posted something at American Thinker about this. When I was a little boy in Cuba, we had a great uncle on my father's side who was a huge admirer of President Lincoln. Uh, would read all his books and even could even recite the Gettysburg Address in Spanish and in English, which was pretty incredible. I guess he translated it into Spanish. I don't never asked him about it, but he would do that. And then the first time we came to the United States, that first spring or that first year, I was familiar with Lincoln probably more than most other immigrants because of that experience with my great uncle. And so I remember my first February the 12th, Bill, that the little school that I went to, it was a great school that I went to. You had posters of Abraham Lincoln everywhere on his birthday, and it was a huge deal. And I thought that was great. I kept thinking to myself, my great uncle would be so proud to see this. I don't know if they do that anymore, Bill, but that's the way it used to be. I
Oh
thought
yeah,
it's a shame that if we're not doing it, I think it's a real shame.
I suspect they do it in some schools, but when I was growing up, this is before we had President's Day. Lincoln's birthday and Washington's birthday were celebrated separately. And then somebody decided that it would be a great idea to put them together and call it President's Day.
Right.
And that's what it is today. Um, I think there's a certain reality here that as time goes on and generations go on, there's a natural tendency to forget these commemorations or to hold them in a smaller way. Many of the kids alive today probably have only heard of Lincoln once, perhaps mentioned once in a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
But we certainly don't celebrate his birthday as a separate entity as we used to when I
Right.
was growing up. So, yes, it's February 12th, Abraham Lincoln, and we know that for our use here, that he was America's first president, is often called the father of, now I'm now referring to Washington, uh, the father of our country. When
Right.
it comes to Lincoln, he is called the great emancipator.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing about Lincoln that we commemorate today is that he is the man who really saved the Union, who kept the United States together as one nation. And I don't know if another president would have had that ability or strength.
Right. No, he was amazing, and you're right. I do remember that we celebrated George Washington separately, and then I guess somebody came up with the idea that it would be good to do it on a Monday so that they can have an extended holiday sometime.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there, okay, well, I'm all for an extra holiday, but let's not forget the meaning of the 12th of the month and the 22nd of the month. But anyway, so that's the big holiday we celebrate today. And the other one is maybe more musical, and that's George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue made its debut today, professional debut today. And that has always been one of my favorite pieces, Bill.
I think it's a favorite of many people. It was the piece that was played at Aeolian Hall in New York City on this day. And that is basically, it was basically a small concert hall. Paul Whiteman conducted the band, and he asked Gershwin to contribute something to the concert, and that is a short piece that demonstrates jazz.
Hmm.
Well, the rest, as they say, is history. Lincoln, Lincoln, Gershwin came in with a piece called "Rhapsody in Blue," and once it was played, it became enormously popular around the country. We didn't have television in those days. We barely had a little bit of radio, but something this big and this great being introduced on radio was quite rare. But people did hear it. They heard it in the hall, and I think it was immediately recognized as a very important piece, that it would do something else besides entertain temporarily. And that became the case. It really became the symbol of the addition of American music to the
Hmm.
classical music package. That
Right.
for the first time, America had broken through, and an American piece became known as a classical piece, and
Right.
that was always its history after that. And Gershwin is often given credit, not by everybody, but by many, as the man who brought America onto the world stage in music.
Well, he wrote some great things. American in Paris. Now, was American in Paris a Broadway play as well, or I don't
Well, there
remember
was an
that.
attempt a few years ago to make it into a Broadway play. I don't think it was overwhelmingly
Mm,
successful, but American in Paris became a piece played regularly, being part of the package, so to speak, of the New York Philharmonic, and
mm.
it was made uh, popular by Leonard Bernstein, who became conductor of the Philharmonic. And of course, it was the name of the motion picture, An American in Paris, which was about 1950,
Mm.
produced with Gene Kelly as the star. And as a result of the movie, which I believe won the Academy Award, it became a staple in the American repertoire.
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that. Did you ever meet? I'm curious, Gershwin, when you were working on the Tonight Show?
He was long dead, unfortunately.
Okay. Mm.
However, we lived in
When did he
Manhattan.
die? Now you mentioned that. When did he die?
1938.
Oh, okay. All right.
He
Okay.
was. It was a terrible tragedy for the country. He was
Mm.
only. I think it was. I think he was 37
Oh,
when he
wow.
died. He died of brain cancer, and it just took the wind out of American
Yeah.
music, because
Yeah.
Gershwin was one of those people you always expected to be there,
Right.
and he died after a brief period in which he felt illness, but they didn't know exactly what it was. Well, they finally determined it was brain cancer, and a leading surgeon was brought in, but it was too late to save him.
Wow.
He died, and it shocked the nation. And the thing that has always been said about him: imagine if he had lived, what he would contribute further to American music.
Right. No, I agree. I didn't realize that he had died young.
Yes.
So that's something I learned. Now, of course, we've come a long way from Gershwin to what we watched the other night in the Super Bowl halftime show,
Yeah.
which I don't know, where did we go wrong, but but that Bill, that was awful. That football halftime show. It was for me. Now maybe it's generational,
Oh,
but
yes, it
it
is.
was just absolutely awful. And look, I've seen some of these shows before where the NFL usually tries to go mainstream on these things, and they'll put a country singer or maybe a popular singer that at least you recognize the name. But
Yes.
in this case, Bill, I had no idea who the name was, the songs that he did, and I couldn't even listen to what he was saying because I don't think he was singing. I don't know what he was doing, but it just completely turned me off. And I don't know. I think a lot of people probably reacted the same way I did from what I'm hearing, Bill.
I think you're right. There is a generational change in some music, and this was music clearly that was designed as a kind of ethnic music for a
Mhm.
particular groups. You certainly didn't get the feeling that those of us who were not of that group, we certainly didn't get the feeling that we were part of it.
Mhm.
It was the kind of music that many people rejected as important music, but some accepted it. And the the difference between Rhapsody and Blue and what we heard during that ragtime, or during that Super Bowl exhibition, was absolutely dramatic.
Right.
One was just basically local music, as good as it might have been to the local folks. I'm not putting anyone down. And of course, Rhapsody in Blue became a great classic and identified in the music world American achievement in music.
Right. No, for me, I mean, I wasn't thinking about Rhapsody in Blue when I was trying to understand what that guy was saying the other night
Right.
in the Super Bowl. I was just trying to figure out where did I, what radio station did I miss? Because I never heard that before. And
Yeah,
I just found myself completely disconnected from it. And as I read the reviews and I hear what people said about it, um, I don't, I mean, at least what I saw, I didn't see a lot of people saying what a tremendous show that was. I see a lot of people asking the question. In fact, some people are even saying that the commissioner should be fired. I wouldn't go that far, but still, I mean, that wasn't. I don't think that was mainstream American music. I'll put it that way.
I think you're right. And, you would think that the Super Bowl of all institutions would try to be inclusive.
Yeah.
But when you actually saw it, you felt that there had been some negotiations and maybe some demands,
Hmm.
but it was presented to us not as an inclusive piece, but as basically an ethnic piece. And
Right.
as beautiful as some may have found it, I think it was disappointing for others because they didn't feel included.
Exactly. But it did lead me to a conclusion that maybe we should go back to the bands and the cheerleaders because if you the very first Super Bowl uh, back in '67, which was the Packers and the Chiefs, Kansas City and Green Bay. That first Super Bowl, the halftime show was the University of Arizona and the Grambling State Marching Band.
Yes.
Now I'm sitting there saying, Grambling State puts on quite a show because I've seen a lot of their. I mean, they've appeared on many, many stages, and they are fabulous. I mean, you go see that anything you see Grambling State, they put on a great show.
Hmm.
And University of Arizona was just another good college band. But you would think if we go back to that, and maybe they can negotiate something, Bill, like find a sponsor, and the sponsor can fly in the bands and maybe fly in the kids and their families, and then maybe give some sponsorships or some college scholarships or some money to the schools. I think that would be a great way to showcase American youth.
I think that's true, and I agree with you that if we took that form of music and presented it in the best possible way with the best possible musicians, I think you would have something that at least people would be interested in. They wouldn't tune it out.
Right.
But the halftime shows are not what they used to be. At one time, the Super Bowl halftime shows were really shows.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, there was the
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of show you would see in New York or in California, but we saw an interesting game, to put it mildly. We saw some football history being made, but as far as the halftime shows, I think more people, at least people of our age or of my age, use the halftime shows to take care of business, to talk to the relatives, call mama, and maybe have a bite.
Right. And
Uh,
I think the eating is what most people did
well,
probably.
oh, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
that's that's why there is a Super Bowl,
Right.
and we did the same thing and had a good time eating.
That's right. Well, at least, Bill, we didn't have to think about the constitutional crisis
Oh
during the Super Bowl, but
no,
the crisis is back. You know what I mean?
sure.
The constitutional crisis is back, or so we're being told, that we're in the middle of a constitutional crisis, that the world is going to come to an end because Trump and his sidekick, Musk, are going to take over the government. And it's just a matter of time, Bill, before we see tanks rolling down Pennsylvania Avenue and we see Trump in one tank and maybe Musk in the other. But these Democrats are silly. I don't know how else to say it, Bill. They're silly. There is no constitutional crisis. Uh, I mean, what's happening is something I've seen before, Bill, and I'm sure you have too.
Oh, sure. It's simply an appeal to the federal court system,
Yeah.
and it is fairly common. But the to the Democratic Party, anything that they don't agree with is an attack on democracy or a constitutional crisis, and we must accept that, and we must rush out our best constitutional lawyers to save democracy. which is in terrible peril. One of the Democratic politicians said yesterday, "I've never seen anything like it. To see us this close to a dictatorship, I didn't feel close to a dictatorship. I saw the United States government at work and the court system at work. I think that some of these issues will be settled very carefully, but certainly don't think we're in a constitutional crisis."
No, and in fact, I think one of the orders has already been or not, what I can't think of the word, but has already been appealed and won, right? I mean,
Yeah, well, yes, it was appealed, and the judge in the case clarified, district
okay.
court judge, his original decision to say yes, the president does have this power. I think there were other parts of the original decision that will go forward on appeal.
Okay, but at least the judge read what he wrote and realized that it was not very smart, I guess, and
Mhm.
decided to amend it. But it's stuff we've seen before. I mean, now I will say this, and I criticize I think both Democrats and Republicans here, and that a lot of this is happening because we're using executive orders, and an executive order opens up the president to this kind of stuff
Yes.
because it's not like signing a regular piece of legislation where the judges really have no. I mean, they really cannot do anything about it. I guess you can always question the constitutionality of a law, but it's a lot more complicated. But an executive order, as a president, you do open up yourself for these kinds of challenges. Because I remember during the Biden administration, the attorney general here in Texas, Paxton, I think he spent half of the Biden administration suing him. I
Yes.
mean, for this or this or this or that. Now, maybe I'm being partisan, but I thought the cases were much stronger against President Biden than they are now against President Trump, because the appeal, or what Paxton was challenging, was, for example, the sanctuary law, the sanctuary city law, and he was also challenging abortion laws, and he was challenging changes in immigration that the president was making by executive order, and the governor I know was challenging the idea that Texas could defend itself against illegal immigration. So at least to me, it sounded like the Texas had much better arguments than they do right now, Bill.
Oh yes, I mean some of the cases that are being brought now against Texas, against President Trump, seem absurd. The suggestion, for example, in some of the ones against the president, that he doesn't have the power to do what he is doing. I've seen a number of constitutional lawyers on television saying this is what the power of the presidency is. This is
Yeah.
what the executive branch does. There is a feeling, at least from the legal authorities I've seen and heard, that these cases would be won by the president on appeal. The problem is it slows things down a great deal, puts the president under pressure he should not be put under, especially very early in the administration. And they have the markings of what is usually called lawfare,
Mm-hmm.
bringing a case for political reasons and perhaps winning in a few courts. The courts so far have been the district courts of the federal system, which is the lowest level of the federal system. It's been pointed out by some legal scholars that when the appeal is made, in other words, an appeal to an appellate court, uh, you're usually going up in the terms of the quality of the legal opinions and the legal opinion writing. And I suspect that will be the case, and that Trump will win all these,
Right.
and uh, and we'll go back to being a country again. But this has now become part of the Democratic Party playbook to run immediately and find a judge. Doesn't even have to be a real judge.
Right.
It might be a soccer judge.
Right.
It might
Whatever. Yeah.
yes, it might be the judge of a Betty Crocker contest.
Right.
But just any judge, and get involved in this legally.
Yeah. They'll look for a home plate umpire and
Yes, that's right.
and have him write the opinion. But what I think is interesting is when you hear all the rhetoric, they talk about the courts are stopping Trump, as they like to say. But in fact, as you indicated, Bill, this is one judge out of like 400.
Oh,
who
yes.
has written this opinion. And when it goes to appeal, because we have a little experience with that here in Texas, when it goes to appeal, they look for a Democrat judge. I mean, that's what they do.
Oh,
They look
yes. That's
for the
judge shopping, it's called.
yeah,
Yeah.
they look for the most liberal judge who they almost know ahead of time that the opinion is coming. I think maybe some of these judges may even put notes on Facebook or saying send it to me, or whatever, right? But anyway, when it goes to appeals, though, it changes because then it's three judges in the appeals court, and then that's always more complicated because you got to get two out of the three,
Yes.
and those are usually, as you indicated, more serious judges who do this all the time. And I know that in Texas we had all kinds of problems, uh, with this kind of judge shopping, as you correctly called it. And every time I went to appeals, the governor would win.
Yes. Hmm. It's a very
So
common situation. This
yeah,
this kind of law case is often designed simply to slow things up,
right,
to harass the president. It is, I think, something that embarrasses us as a nation. He is a new president. He has got to govern. That's what he's there for. That's what the executive branch is there for. And you get
right.
some of these silly cases that he will eventually win in all probability. And I think there's a general feeling that the Democrats have gotten silly again, as you point out, and that the Democratic Party is being demeaned by its own radical leaders.
Exactly. No, you're exactly right. I mean, when you listen to some of the rhetoric, it's absolutely incredible. Um, but it is who they are right now. I mean, that is unfortunately who the party has become, or what the party has become. And if I were I was listening actually this morning to a traditional Democrat. Epstein is his last name. I think Jonathan or Epstein is his last name. And he was saying that on the radio, saying, "Hey, this is crazy. We should be focusing on real issues."
Yes,
And here they are fighting with Trump because Trump wants to clean up this agency. And what are they defending? Sending condoms to Africa or financing whatever opera, wherever it was. Or I mean, it's stuff like that that most people say, why are we even doing it in the first place?
exactly. Well, the argument on the other side here is that the president doesn't have the authority to pull back that order of condoms. Now, if he doesn't have the authority to do that, what does he have the authority to do? Aside from throwing out the first ball in the baseball season.
Right.
No, this is what he is to make sure that the laws are faithfully executed. But when you have a law that's this absurd and got through. I think he tried to veto it, and it got through. Or maybe it was a previous administration. That I don't remember. But I think he is making sure that the laws are faithfully executed, and has refused to spend some of the money authorized by Congress because they
Right.
have found out through the normal overview of a project process of the executive branch. They have found out that the money was ill spent.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's what the founders had in mind, that the president is given money to then blindly spend it on anything the Congress wants.
Right.
So he is fulfilling, in my view at least, the role of the president as expressed by Congress.
He's the executive, and
That's right.
the other thing too is that the Wall Street Journal had an editorial today, basically saying that the President Biden also used his discretion to spend money that Congress had appropriated. So it hopefully, these things sometimes they're a blessing in disguise, because if they had not, if this judge had not written the opinion and put an end to it, then we wouldn't have the pleasure of watching Maxine Waters
Yes.
and Elizabeth Warren, some of these other people put on the kind of shows that they put. So maybe there's a blessing in disguise to all of this, that we get to be entertained
Yes, it is
by some of these
entertainment.
people.
It
So
is entertainment. Of course, you have to keep your children away from the screen
right, that's
because
right.
it also includes a substantial amount of obscenity, which used to be by custom barred from people at the congressional level. And it's disgraceful
It
what
is.
they say in public, and there is a tremendous backlash against it. Um, it's been discussed at the political level, and many people are dismayed that any group representing a political party would stoop to that level.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to something that seems to be moving fairly well, and that's the cabinet formation. Today, Tulsi Gabbard got in. I understand. I always want to say Senator Kennedy, but that's another one.
Yes,
Robert F.
Robert
Kennedy Jr.
Kennedy.
Robert
Yeah.
Kennedy Jr. apparently will get in this afternoon, Wednesday afternoon. He'll be in by tonight, and then I guess the only one left is Patel. Now, I am not going to deny that there were some of these people that he selected, President Trump selected. Maybe I would have selected different people. I'm not going to deny that I felt that way. But it is his team. And he won the
Yes.
election. And it's like, I'm the manager of a baseball team. He gets to pick the pitching coach and the third base coach.
Yes.
And then you got to deal with the consequences. And,
Well,
and that's the way it is here, Bill. I don't like the politicization of these confirmations, Bill.
yes, the constitutional, or rather the Senate power and authority to advise and consent is just that, to
Right.
advise and consent if they wish to consent. They may not consent, they can turn the nominee down, but usually a nominee who has the basic qualifications and has the endorsement of the president, which all nominees have, uh, would be sufficient. And people might say, well, as a U.S. Senator, I don't really agree with the individual, but he or she seems qualified for the office. And we used to kind of stop at that point, but the court has now been so completely compromised and politicized that we almost know in advance what most judges on the court will do once confirmed by the Senate, once they get up into the actual action of the Supreme Court.
Right.
And yes, I think the confirmation process itself has gone on much too long. The president should get the people he wants to, unless there is a genuinely serious
Right.
objection, and that it's turning into the notion that the Supreme Court nominating procedure is simply a formality that should not get in the way of any nominee.
Right.
Once again, the politicization of the judicial system, which President Trump has vowed to eliminate, and I
Right.
hope he does eliminate it because this has gone much too far.
Right. And these cabinet positions, I mean, the president is ultimately going to be politically responsible for these choices. I mean, if any member of the cabinet turns out to be a buffoon or a problem
Oh
or an
yes,
embarrassment, it's going to come back to the president. So, I mean, why not just give him the team that he wants? Say, okay, you want this team? Fine. Let's approve the team, and they can hit the ground running as soon as you walk into the White House, and let's deal with the policy. Sometimes you get the feeling that many of these Democrat senators who were opposing these nominees had like their little 5-minute speech just totally nailed down, to 5 minutes,
yes,
so that it would fit perfectly in a Twitter or X, whatever they call it, in an X post. The 5-minute speech that fits
oh
perfectly,
yes.
and I think it demeans the process, Bill. It really becomes. I don't know. I cannot say that. I mean, I don't know what the founding fathers had in mind, but I have a funny feeling it wasn't this.
No, I don't think it was this or anything approaching this. I think what they had in mind was a formal procedure
Yeah,
that will allow someone to serve unless some egregious defect was found during the advise and consent period. But I really can't see how some of these people can be turned down on that basis, when in fact these people may have been controversial in their careers, but I don't see any of them having the kind of characteristic that would get them thrown off the nomination list.
that's right. Again, it may not have been my list.
Right.
Maybe if I was doing my list, I probably would have had some different people. But again, he won, and he gets to choose. And I don't I felt all of them were generally qualified. They may not have been the person I would have preferred, but I think the president does get to choose his own people. Now, on another important story, Bill, and that is that President Trump and President Putin had a conversation on the phone, and it's an ongoing situation. So we'll know a lot more, I believe, tonight or tomorrow. But it does seem, and I'd like to get your reaction. It does seem that something is being talked about here to end the Ukraine war. That's the feeling I get. Do you get that feeling, Bill?
Yes, I get the feeling that that is certainly the objective of President Trump. Well, he said it was
Yes.
the objective to bring this war to an end. And I think that Putin, if he was smart, and we don't really can't really guarantee that, but he would certainly want to bring it to an end because his armed forces have taken a terrible beating,
Right.
have gotten a little bit of Ukrainian territory, but based on today's performances, I don't think they're going to get much more, if any more, and it will be a very unsatisfying ending to to the war, at least in terms of Putin's view. So both Putin and the president of Ukraine have a motive for going into these preliminary talks, and that is, I think, both of them want out of the war, but only on their terms.
Right. And that's where Trump is going to have to negotiate between them. I'm sure he could figure out some way of doing that. But everything I read, just in these stuff that comes on the internet and so on, is that the Russian army has taken, as you say, heavy loss. Well, so has Ukraine,
Oh yes,
and and that there's great dissatisfaction. So if you're Putin, you have to wonder a little bit at what point some of these military people are going to turn on you.
yes.
So he's probably not taking a lot of midnight walks over in the parks there in Moscow. I mean, he's probably everywhere he goes. I'm sure he's probably pretty well protected because it is there's great dissatisfaction. I read somewhere, Bill, that factories in Russia do not have enough men to work.
That's right. Russia itself does not have enough qualified workers,
Yeah.
and I think what is so interesting is that North Korea, apparently at Russia's request, has sent troops to the Ukraine, and they've been fighting. I mean, this we talk about a world war that gets closer to a world war because you have a number of countries then involved, and the Ukrainian army has been added to by Russian soldiers. A very very frightening and very dangerous development.
That's right, and apparently the North Koreans are also taking losses, from what I understand too. That
Yes.
their army is so. Of course, they don't care. I mean, what do they care? If you're North Korean, you're probably glad you're fighting in Ukraine. I mean,
Well,
just to get out of North Korea. I mean, that's got to be the forest in Ukraine has got to be better than living in North Korea. I would think.
well, people can debate that because
Right.
at least living in North Korea, you don't have a shooting war going on.
That's right.
Uh,
Well, you might eat better though. You might have better diet or
Probably better lunches and
yeah.
snacks.
At
Yes.
least you can steal food from some of the homes that you find in your different activities there in Ukraine. Well, one last foreign policy point, Bill, that I wanted to mention is uh, the hostages and threats from President Trump and even from the Prime Minister of Israel about the war starting again, or at least military activities again. What is your view on that?
I think it would be a terrible tragedy. I
Mm-hmm.
think that the Prime Minister of Israel feels it would not be a terrible tragedy if the war was continued and Israel won a decisive victory, and I can understand his position. But I think most people feel it would be a tragedy because there's a risk then of a truly wider war that may include foreign elements.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Russians might get involved in Gaza. Somebody else might be involved, and and the hostages would, in that case, probably be killed. So
Yeah.
I think it would be very regrettable. And yet they're at loggerheads. Your description was correct. The Russian side is suggesting that it may go back to warfare and not continue the release of hostages.
Right. That would be, and I mean, it's something that we've said many times, but I feel so bad for the families
Oh yes,
of the hostages that are still back there. Now, some of them may be dead, so that may be the reason they don't want to release them. I don't know. But President Trump keeps talking about somebody's going to be held to pay and all that kind of stuff. But you're right; it's going to end up killing the hostages if we do anything.
yes,
Now, my guess is that if anything happens, it'll be the Israelis. I just hope that we defend them a little bit better this time,
yes.
and at least use the military power that we have in the Mediterranean and nearby to keep the Iranians out of it.
A very important goal.
Yeah, because the Iranians are out of it, or at least the Houthis or whatever these other groups are called. Then I think Israel has a better shot. Somebody also mentioned, Bill, that the Israelis know more about where these people are now because during the ceasefire they've been able to learn more about their hideouts and so on. So that I don't know about that, but that's what I heard.
That's. I think it's an informed rumor. I think it may be a propaganda rumor to put pressure on Hamas, but the Israelis certainly have agents over there, and they can also pick up the chatter on radios and other things that might tell us where at least some of the hostages are, and they want to get those hostages out because they really do symbolize the horrible events of uh, October 7th of 2023, and they do symbolize the fact that wars involve civilians,
Right.
and you can't really avoid that.
No.
All these people being kept hostage are civilians and did not ask for this war and did not volunteer to participate. But
No,
here
you're
they are
right.
in prison.
No, it's a horrible situation. October 7th, I still cannot believe that it happened, but it was a horrible day, and what else can you say about it? Well, Bill, one last question I wanted to ask you. I forgot to ask you about this when we were talking about the Super Bowl, but if I could just go back to it for a second,
Sure.
did you ever imagine when the Super Bowl started, which was in '67? That it would become what it has become. I didn't. I mean, I remember watching the first game with my father and my brother. And at the time, it wasn't even called the Super Bowl. It was called the NFL versus the AFL championship game because you
That's
had two
exactly
different
right.
leagues.
Yeah.
And, but anyway, I mean, I remember watching it with my father and my brother. And Bill, nobody would have predicted that the Super Bowl has become this American event where it consumed everybody's consumed from 1 o'clock to 10 o'clock on on Sunday. I mean, it must be 90% of the TVs are watching the game.
Oh, yes.
Everything. I mean, it's amazing. I never thought it would become like that. And how do you feel about it?
I think you're exactly right. I remember back to those days also, where professional football was fighting for acceptance
Sure.
as one of the great national sports, and somebody came up with this idea of a championship game, and it was a football game. But what it is today is it's a national event. The game is almost an afterthought,
Yes.
and today it has political significance. They try to make things a political symbol. It has cultural significance, and what you're watching is what everyone else in the nation is watching, but not quite taking it that seriously. I mean, it
No.
is only a championship game, but absolutely. I mean, I turn on the Super Bowl, and I don't even follow football, but I want to be part of the event.
Right. You want to be there so you can talk. I bet a lot of people just want to watch the game so that tomorrow at work they can say, "Oh yeah, I saw that play." And
Absolutely.
but the other thing too that amazes me, Bill, about the Super Bowl is how international it has become.
Oh, yes.
I mean, this is a game that is being watched in all over Europe, all over Latin America. Uh, I'm not, maybe China, I'm not sure, but Japan for sure, South Korea for sure. And so you have like it's it's not like the World Cup. That is, that is the premier international event, but it's got to be number two.
Oh yeah, yeah. There are certain events that grow outside their own importance. And it's an excuse for people to have a party, which is probably the main reason for it becoming an event.
Well, I
So
keep thinking that the retail stores, they close their books at the end of January, right? So if they have a
yes,
slow Christmas, at least they've got the Super Bowl to develop some
that's
sales.
exactly right. Yes. And then I'm sure there will soon be a post Super Bowl game, a challenge of some kind, or an international event, all part of the Super Bowl family, which means all part of making money and eating a lot.
And I guess there's nothing wrong with that as long as everybody has a good time.
Yes.
But it is amazing to me, those championship games in the NFL used to be like maybe the first week of January. The first Super Bowl was on the 15th of January, and this Super Bowl was on the 8th or the 9th of February. So we've gone one more month
That's right.
into the calendar to have all these games.
Keep it going,
So
keep it going, keep it going.
keep it going.
And
Yeah.
make sure
So
your store is open at night.
that's right. That's right. Especially your liquor store.
Oh
Make sure
yeah.
that it's open because I don't know. I can only imagine how much liquor is consumed that day.
Oh, that's dangerous.
Probably
That's
the size of a country's GDP.
oh, probably. But that is the dangerous part of it. And I don't know if there were any tragedies associated with alcohol at this Super Bowl, but it's always one of the things I worry about.
Well, I understand that the celebrations in Philadelphia, as one would expect, got a little bit out of hand, and there were people already climbing trees and lampposts even before the game ended.
Yeah.
So I'm also convinced that there is a professional game celebration committee in this country that arranges all these things so that they can say, "Okay, everybody ready? Go celebrate."
Yes.
It
Well, we will. You can be sure that you will soon be hearing stories about the preparations for the next Super Bowl game.
That's right. That's exactly right. In fact, I think the next 5 or 6 Super Bowls are already scheduled. The
I think
cities, that
so.
is.
I
Yeah.
think so.
But it does remind me of a story that maybe you remember. I remember watching that baseball documentary by Ken Burns
Yes.
and reading the story that in Brooklyn there was a somebody who had a hamburger joint or something very famous there in Brooklyn.
Nathan's,
Yes, who said that he would give out free cheeseburgers or something or free hot dogs
something like it.
If the Brooklyn Dodgers ever won the World Series. So
Right.
when they did in '55, I wonder if he had enough inventory, Bill.
That I don't remember, but yes, that was Nathan's. They had all these contests, very famous hot dog stand that became an institution. All presidential candidates had to stop at Nathan's when they were in New York.
Oh wow, is he still around, Nathan? I wonder.
No, I think Nathan is long, has gone to the reward of all good hot dog makers.
Okay, so the only thing that still remains from that day of Dodger victory is the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Okay. All right, Bill. Have a great day, and thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
You too, Silvio. Look forward to next time.
All right, thank you so much. Our good friend Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda, talking about some serious things. We were having fun there at the end, but lots of other serious things like the constitutional crisis that the Democrats keep telling us that we're under, and of course the cabinet and other things as well. But I think the most serious event here in the next 24 hours, this conversation between President Putin and President Trump. I think there's something there that we'll probably be reading about a lot more. So watch the news here Thursday and this week, because I think there's more coming on that. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later.